I'm Arthur Gaudet. I have over 50 years in the transit industry. I started as a cleaner and a fueler. I drove, instructed, dispatched, and supervised. Having come up through the ranks, I've also served as general manager on multiple transit systems. Transit service disruptions are a way of life. Seldom does a day pass without some sort of accident, incident, detour, or delay, major or minor. While I do have a little experience with rail, the bulk of my time has been spent in the fixed route bus mode. This presentation will discuss buses, not rail. As a result of my experience, I've written 2 books: On-Time Performance in the Transit Industry, a practical guidebook, and Managing the Scheduling Function, a guide for transit executives. Referring to my on-time performance work, good supervision is one of the 5 musts. I'll also note that while must number 3 is enough operators, which I address in another video, supervisors have a great impact on operator retention, as their actions, tone of voice, support, and coaching affect retention. None of us wants to work for a bad boss. So I will suggest that none of us wants to be that bad boss, the person who causes headaches for both those who we support as we're frontline managers and for the senior management to whom we report. In these days of cash registers telling us how to make change, GPS devices ordering us how to drive our automobiles, restoring transit service may have become a lost art. While most of us learn by working side by side with experienced veterans, retirements, especially since the Great Resignation and many early retirements, have robbed us of much institutional knowledge. So this presentation will give ideas of some ways to respond to service disruptions. It's not all-encompassing, and no canned response can replace thinking and acting in the moment. Every situation will have some differences, but there will also be some similarities. So, after your first view of this video, consider whether it can serve as a prompt in developing your own playbook, checklist, or plan of attack. The time to think is before things happen, to minimize the risk of getting lost in the fog of the moment. Think about where supervisors and dispatchers fit into the operation. Think, too, that our ultimate goal is serving the public. This is a twofold approach. We support service by supporting the frontline workers, the operators. We also support service by being the actors, the fixers, the change agents when things go wrong. Our actions not only ensure a needed ambulance arrives as fast as possible, but also ensure that service disruptions don't stop passengers later that day from getting to work, school, doctor, shopping. In past generations, many supervisors were cops trying to catch people doing something wrong. Over the generations, that has changed, in my opinion rightly so, into becoming coaches rather than cops. Yes, sometimes discipline is warranted, but if we make a mistake, if we do something wrong, wouldn't we rather be coached than punished? Support is essential. Over the years, I've heard many dispatchers respond to an operator's plea for help by saying, "Do the best you can." By the time an operator calls on the radio for help, they are already doing that. That's why they asked. You're supposed to know more than they do. You're supposed to have the big picture. So again, in my opinion, responding, do the best you can, is disrespectful to the operator and does not help to solve the problem. A better response would be to let the operator know what you're doing to address the issue, or what you're going to do, or that you don't have the resources at this very moment, but keep them informed. The dispatcher and supervisor may become overwhelmed. For that reason, I believe it's good practice for management to monitor the company radio frequency. That way they can provide coaching to the dispatcher or supervisor if that happens to be warranted. More importantly, if something major is happening, they are able to become aware immediately and intervene if and as necessary. The National Transit Institute offers a course entitled Transitioning from Frontline Employee to Frontline Supervisor. The Community Transportation Association of America offers a course entitled Certified Community Transit Supervisor. So help is available beyond just on-the-job training. Moving up through the ranks is hard. Transitioning to supervision, particularly supervising former co-workers that remember our mistakes, our misdeeds, is hard. Learning to become the coach and the cop when necessary is hard. So take advantage of any training you can get. This session is not about becoming a better manager. I mentioned courses that address those skills. This session is about becoming more street smart. We are about to see an example of a dispatcher and operator interaction. Note that one of the first responses to the operator's troubles, the check engine light versus speed comment, may or may not be a supervisor. He may be another operator. But it's likely the main responder is either a dispatcher or a road supervisor. My money would be on it being a dispatcher. Let me comment before I play this. There are many bus fire videos available on YouTube. Unfortunately, that proves that bus fires are not a rare event. This video, though, is not about bus fires. The point of this video is the supervisor-operator interaction. I'll make another note. I contacted the television station to request permission to use this video. They told me that they had posted the video on YouTube and discussed the YouTube fair use policy, thus dealing with any copyright issues. That fair use policy is why I am able to include the video in this presentation.
Obtained by the WBRZ investigative unit through a public records request shows the driver noticed a problem.
I have a check engine light on this bus, and it's not going over 15 miles an hour. Yeah, that's normal.
It was anything but normal. 12 minutes passed and the situation on bus 202 became worse.
Bus 202. I got real bad fumes coming out the back of this bus. This coming out bad. I'm asking, should I go up here with this bus like this? 24 operator, you might be polluting the air, but it's not going to harm anybody.
Drivers we talked to declined to go on camera out of fear of being fired. But all of them say this situation put the public's safety at risk. They say it also exposes a big disconnect between dispatch and the people who are driving the buses.
And this is bus 202. Yeah, there was a little bit of air
The
pollution.
most dramatic fire of the year was this one at the Mall of Louisiana, as a cat's bus was engulfed in flames.
Let's use the bus fire situation as an example. I will call it a major disruption because that bus and driver will not be going back in service soon. Actually, the bus will never go back in service. A further note here. When an operator is involved in a major event, good practice is to remove the operator from service for a period of time, possibly the rest of the day, ensuring the driver does not lose any pay. While the operator may say that he or she is not shaken, is not upset, is able to continue in service, the decision is better made by a third party, a supervisor, or a manager. I recall an incident in the late 1970s where a pedestrian committed suicide by stepping out headfirst in front of a bus. Obviously not the operator's fault, and he seemed okay at the scene. But it was better to pull him out of service in case there was a delayed reaction. The supervisor on the scene did so, making a very smart call. So let's look at what steps are needed in responding to a major situation. Identify the situation, guide the on-scene operator as needed, in all cases remain calm and transmit that calmness. First things first. But it doesn't stop there unless it occurs on the last trip and the bus is only a few feet from the garage. So let's prioritize. First, deal with the emergency. By the way, on your telephone system, do you have speed dial buttons for the police, fire, ambulance? Slightly off the current subject, does your local 911 call center offer the chance for you to sit in with them and learn from their dispatchers? Listen, and in particular, listen to the calmness of those dispatchers. It's the equivalent of a ride-along with the police or fire department. A lot of radio professionalism can be learned that way, and you also learn the needs of the 911 people. They need to know what, they need to know where, and they need to know it as quickly as possible. Remember my mention of a playbook or a checklist? The time to buy an umbrella is before the rainstorm. The time to buy a shovel is before the blizzard hits. Another factor here. Keep notes as things are happening. They don't have to be formal, just something on a sheet of paper so you can keep track of what is happening, what is being done, what has been done, who is doing it, so you can fill out reports later. Another way to think of priorities. It's relatively easy to focus on what is right in front of us, the current emergency. In reality, it ain't over until it's over, and over is the full restoration of service. Smaller systems have fewer service disruptions. We may have inexperienced supervisors who only get as far as the first two sub-bullet points. Handle the current emergency, take care of the operators and passengers. But focusing only on those immediate internal tasks misses the long-range effects on service and passengers for the rest of the day. Perhaps over-reliance on technology is a factor, but AVL, computer displays telling us where buses are, only tell us what is happening. It does not think, it does not forecast. While large systems, maybe 200 or more buses, have some kind of crisis every day, the small 10 bus, 20 bus, 30 bus systems don't. They don't have the opportunity to practice and learn frequently. Would it make sense to take some time for them and set up tabletop training scenarios? Before computers, all we had to worry about was moving people. Our term for ghost buses at that time was a bus that appeared on the public timetable but for some reason never ran. Now ghost buses take on a different aspect. People don't look out the window to see if it's raining, they study their cell phones. In the example here, the transit system does a great job responding to service disruptions, but it is not reflected in the data. The buses actually run. However, when they don't reflect in the data, they become ghost buses to those passengers who rely on the cell phone app. The passenger who reads the timetable and goes to the bus stop rides the bus. The passenger that looks at their cell phone does not get to ride the bus because he or she doesn't know the bus is running. A further result is that their on-time performance statistics, which are reported to the board and to the public, look bad, despite the fact that this system does a great job with maintaining service in the face of disruptions, primarily caused by railroad delays. Let's see an example of a minor disruption. Quick bus replacement. Your situation, 8:10 in the morning, an inbound bus heading to downtown is only 3 miles outside of downtown with a flat front tire. By the way, if it's a flat rear tire, contact the shop. They may allow you to have the driver continue in service to discharge the passengers at restricted speed. Contact the shop, understand your system's policy. In our case, the flat front tire, that bus is not going anywhere. How do we take care of the passengers? If the following bus is within maybe 10 minutes, 12, maybe even 15, that following bus picks up the passengers and delays are minimized. That bus may be there before we can respond from the shop. Perhaps if you run much commuter service, there's a morning tripper bus that has finished its last trip and is about to deadhead back to the garage from downtown. Use that empty bus and driver to go pick up the passengers. To prepare, have what's known as a cheat sheet, a list of buses going out of service with their time and location. That will tell you who you can grab quickly. Now, if the troubled bus is on its last trip, if it was an AM tripper, everything is covered once the passengers are accommodated. The shop will take care of the bus. The driver will probably come back with that bus, submit an overtime slip, make sure they get paid because they're working. However, if the bus is an all-day block, maybe we use that empty tripper returning to the garage for a coach exchange. If we don't have an empty tripper returning from downtown to the garage, obviously we have to send a replacement bus out from the garage. Then we use other methods, we'll discuss a little later, to get the bus back on time. Here is another scenario. The bus is running 12 minutes late due to a detour resulting from a fire department action. Maybe if we know and understand the schedule, we can instruct that driver to use his or her upcoming recovery time. If the problem can be resolved in the next hour, hour and a half, or maybe even 2 hours. By the way, a good policy for recovery time is about 9 minutes out of every operating hour, which is about 15%. We can also have a late bus go discharge only to increase velocity and catch up on time. But there must be a following bus nearby to pick up the waiting passengers. Turn the destination sign to discharge only, or sorry, please take next bus. Passengers are served. Or we can transfer passengers to the following bus, again if it is very close, and we can deadhead or short turn to get the late bus on time somewhere. Unlikely, but in some cities this can work, particularly if service is frequent. Two buses that run together, that's called bus bunching, can go skip stop, where every other stop is a pickup for the buses. Of course, passengers on board have to be let down wherever they want to go. This can increase velocity for both buses. So, our example is a building fire. How long is that detour going to be in place? Do we need to think about the following buses, the next half hour, the next hour, the next several hours perhaps in the case of a major fire? Other bus routes? Plan for the long term while you're dealing with the short term. Over the country, cities have had a goal of increasing high-frequency service, buses every 15 minutes. So now we start to see the issue of maintaining headway rather than maintaining a schedule. To the public, headway is the important element. The average wait for a passenger, statistically, is 1/2 of the headway. So with frequent service, like subway trains, passengers are more likely to go to the bus stop and just wait for the next bus. My definition of frequent service is every 15 minutes or less. Now, as we move on to the next slide, think about that issue. Think too about the fact that in maintaining headway, using an example of a 10-minute headway, if every bus is 10 minutes late, every bus is on time as far as the public is concerned. As we move to the next slide, we're going to look at doing the right thing, which can also be the wrong thing. So guidance on what to do is above our pay grade. Setting policy is up to senior managers. The system we're about to see is operated by a contractor who can be financially penalized for late buses. So the bosses will have to come up with the solution, working with the client, and the bosses will have to tell us how they want it handled. Here's our system that runs on the 10-minute headway, and that's all the public timetable says. This is a driver assistance device visible to the driver. It is mounted on the back of the destination sign box in front of the driver's seat. It shows that he is on time, but the spacing is off. He's too close to his leader. He's too far ahead of his follower. Technically then, to maintain the 10-minute headway, to maintain spacing, he should slow down and even out the gap. But then he wouldn't be on time. Obviously, the right thing to do for the passenger is to slow down. By the way, the reason we have a schedule in the first place, the on-time portion, is that in this system, we really cannot maintain headways with dynamic scheduling, manual dispatching at 10-minute intervals from the end of each bus route. Downtown traffic is a factor. We also need to ensure that the driver is at the right place at the right time for relief. Again, that's the need for a schedule. However, if we take the action I suggested, slow down, maintain the spacing, on-time performance, a bus every 10 minutes becomes 100% from the public perspective. But the computer may think that on-time performance is 0%. So we're back to the bosses. The bosses are back to their client, the public body. What is the right thing? What is the best thing to do? Strategic spares are an empty bus and a driver with a radio that works and with a full set of schedules. With operator shortages, having that spare bus and driver can be a dream. but as we increase operator and bus availability, this can help to resolve service disruptions and improve on-time performance. The situation I mentioned earlier with ghost buses is a system that has one or more strategic spare buses at their downtown transit center during the middle of the day, which is the time that they are most likely to run into service delays. Now, let's think about commuter service. In the morning, perhaps we can station one strategic spare bus somewhere out in the country that is within maybe 15 minutes of deadhead time to multiple originating park and ride lots. Station 1, 2, or 3 buses downtown in the afternoon to cover multiple afternoon outbound PM commuter trips. Yes, it costs money, but service quality, measured by on-time performance and missed trips, is essential in retaining and building ridership. Another technique is dropbacks. In our scenario, the entire route has a problem. We're going to see how this works on the next slide. Normal vehicle blocking will be, as you see in the third column, where it says normal blocking. Normally we would use 4 buses, and you will notice there's a 60-minute cycle time. But if we insert a 5th bus, we can go to a 75-minute cycle time. Improving on-time performance as well, it's a good way to handle intermediate problems like construction and detours. If it is a long-term issue, the scheduling department would have blocked this service with 5 buses in the first place, increasing cycle time. Another technique is relays. Here we're less concerned with the bus than with getting the driver back on time for the rest of his or her day. This is complicated, so think about it, plan it out. Often this is not your best option, but maybe sometimes it's the best you can do. If nothing else, it's another tool in your toolbox. Note that coordination and a safe place to cross the street are issues. Chronically late service should be addressed by the scheduling department. What if the next pick is too far off? Maybe they got it wrong. Maybe there's some sort of long-term construction or detours. We need to acknowledge the axiom in our industry: a late bus only gets later. So possibly as service gets later during the morning driver's shift, instead of doing a street relief at relief time, we send out a fresh bus. If it's something that's happening only today and the afternoon driver happens to have come early, he or she is in the driver's room, we put them on the clock, have them pre-trip a bus, pull out, and start the afternoon on time. It resets the clock at the time of relief. The afternoon service is back on time. Improved on-time performance and customer service, in my mind, justifies the additional cost. Now this is what that looks like graphically. For anyone interested in the ins and outs of scheduling, this is called a cut sheet. Long before computers, manual scheduling was done this way with pencils, graph paper, and scissors. Let's talk about preparation. Here's something that can be done to make sure passengers get to work or get home in the afternoon and evening. At least one system builds this into their commuter schedule, and their version of normal is going to be seen. Note that while it does add pay cost, it does not require an extra vehicle and operator as a separate strategic spare standby bus would. Let's see what this looks like. Again, normal blocking is on the left. Here we are using 7 buses. The first bus leaves the garage at 5:10 for the 5:30 trip. The last bus, block 7, leaves the garage at 7:40 to run the 8 o'clock inbound commuter trip. An alternative, though, would be to have that last bus, block 7, leave the garage at the same time as the first bus. Leave the garage at 5:10. That block 7 then sits at the transit center, at the park and ride, from 5:30 until 8 o'clock, protecting all of the other trips, the 5:30, the 6, the 6:30, and the 7, the 7:30, and then, if not needed, it runs its own trip at 8 o'clock. One system, as I mentioned, does this on a regular basis. Maybe we want to do this only if there's bad weather or other problems are forecast. Rain and snow will slow down deadheads, maybe creating gaps or delays in that inbound service. Many cities, particularly in the south, will find that rain creates numerous accidents blocking our buses, whether they're revenue or they're deadhead. Consider, though, that deadhead delay is more likely to be later in the morning. People don't generally get up that early, so having your standby bus deadhead out at 5:10 in the morning is likely to put it ahead of those traffic issues. So maybe we're going to have bad weather, blizzard, heavy rain. On a bad weather day, that may be where we want to make the change to start block 7 out early and service the standby. If the bus is used, you bump the followers back 1 trip. So if all buses are there, everyone from the delay runs 1 trip later. You'll see here that the 7 o'clock trip is red. I'm saying that that bus has been delayed for some reason, but it is still going to make it. So we run our block 7 for the 7 o'clock trip. He was a standby. Now block 5 runs the 7:30 trip. Block 6 runs the 8 o'clock trip. Everything gets covered. Now, let's say that block 5 somehow is not going to make it. Perhaps there was a breakdown on the way. Again, block 7 can cover the 7 o'clock trip. Block 6 has had no issues. You have just gained 1 hour. You have bought time to find a bus and a driver to run the 8 o'clock trip. Buying time can be a very important strategy. Never leave passengers stranded. Would you like your spouse, your kids, or your parents to be stranded with no way home? By the way, if the answer is yes, you might want to keep that to yourself. This can be an issue with northern systems that shut down early during the blizzard, southern systems that shut down in major storms. There should be some kind of system-wide plan to notify passengers, at least with major weather events. These days, they do not crop up without notification. Early passenger warnings are feasible. If we think we may shut down later in the day, we can inform passengers as they are boarding on their outbound trips in the morning. Now, a bigger issue can be a sudden emergency. In Savannah, Georgia, several years ago, a National Guard C-130 aircraft crashed on takeoff. It shut down many roads in the area of the airport, and it shut down a major area that impacted several bus routes. It can happen. So have a plan to get the word out. Don't rely on smartphone apps and push notifications. Not everyone uses them. Use the radio, AM and FM. Use television, but even then someone won't get the word. I am going to suggest that we are still morally responsible to and for those passengers. So have some kind of backup plan so that stranded passengers can call in. Somehow, whether it's any bus in the fleet. The bus shown here is electric, so hopefully it would have a full battery charge. Any bus in the fleet, a supervisor in a van, the general manager in his or her private auto. Do what you need to be sure people get home. Maybe have a taxi company under contract. Again, prior planning. A taxi company under contract may be better than trying to rely on Uber or Lyft, because it's much more likely that taxi employees will have an obligation to work even in bad weather when Uber or Lyft drivers decide that they're safer with a cup of tea at home. Getting away from the service restoration discussion. Let's get back to being an effective supervisor. You're dealing with operators at all levels of experience. I happened to be listening to a company radio frequency when the part-time operator incident occurred. He thought the world was ending, there had been a bomb on the bus. Everyone else listening to the radio knew that it wasn't a big deal, an airbag had blown. Now, speaking of a bomb on the bus, I have had that experience. Thankfully, only once. There was a telephone threat of a bomb on board some bus that had left downtown in a major city. There were several buses, there was frequent service, there were multiple routes. Now, as it turns out, it was the wife of one operator calling in a bomb threat on a bus driven by her husband's girlfriend. So, welcome to transit. Let me deal with that a little more. The service was contracted operation. I was operations manager. Now, I don't recall exactly how the call came in, but the general manager and I became involved almost immediately. We had no prior planning. We had no playbook. So we were trying to make decisions based on very little information. We were trying to identify the vehicle and the operator. The police were instructing us to stay off the radio, fearing that radio transmissions from the bus could set off the bomb. At the same time, though, the client, who was executive director of the public operation, to whom we were under contract, and who happened to be a very unpleasant fellow, was screaming at us over the telephone to use the radio, contact all buses, and identify which bus was affected. Now, the police had both guns and power to arrest us. And obviously, if they were right and the radio set off a bomb, we agreed with the police in not being on the radio. Nothing good would have resulted. We followed police instructions. So I give this elaboration to demonstrate how prior planning, a playbook, would have been invaluable, especially since it would have been signed off by the screaming executive director. So does your system have a playbook for bomb threats? How about other threats? Hostages, other criminal activity, hijacking? Have you worked with the police and fire departments to develop a protocol? Wouldn't it be a good idea to have a plan in place, even with generalities? Again, maybe with some tabletop practice. Here's where upper management comes in, or should come in. Not only should training and teaching be provided, but support should be provided. Many successful companies are successful because they empower their employees to do what they think is the right thing. Hotels avoid complaints because room clerks are empowered to upgrade a guest or discount their stay. Restaurants avoid complaints when there is an issue because sometimes the wait staff, or at least the manager, are empowered to comp a meal, provide a free dessert, or somehow do what they believe to be the right thing. Now, even if the action we take isn't quite right, at least it's action. It's doing something. It's also an opportunity to learn for the next time. The Los Angeles video follows a new operator, streetcar operator in 1947, from hiring through training to turn-in, helping some of us remember those early days, helping others who did not come up through the ranks to get that experience vicariously. One of the interesting portions of this video is after the operator has turned in and is working the extra board. By the way, the extra board is the hardest job in the barn. Where do we normally put new operators? On the extra board. So new operators may already be set up for failure in doing the hardest job with the least knowledge. So back to the video. One of the telling parts is when this new operator on his first or close to his first day is running late and finds a supervisor waiting on the corner for him. The operator's fearful of punishment, and in the video he learns that the supervisor is there to help and explain to him how to get back on time. Many episodes of Undercover Boss show senior managers who obviously don't understand the workers who generate the product or generate the service. So let's make sure that we are not that guy who doesn't know which end of the broom to use. So thank you for your time and for your attention. Now, to purchase either of my books, Improving On-Time Performance in the Transit Industry, or Managing the Scheduling Function, which is a guide for transit executives, please visit my website, runcutter.com. To contact me about my 2-day scheduling course, the Runcutter course, which uses pencil and paper methods to teach the basics of scheduling. We cannot rely on computer software to do our scheduling. We need our brains to make intelligent choices that are the best for the entire transit system. Best for the entire transit system includes some things that may cost money, but are best for the operators, affecting operator retention. I also have an on-time performance workshop. So discuss any of those things, please email me or call me. And again, thank you for your time, thank you for your attention, and I hope that this has helped you in many ways, including that thought of developing the prior planning playbook.